Welcome aboard the Seatbelt Sign podcast. We've been cleared for takeoff.
Let's do it. Another episode. Today I'm talking to Aaron. What's up, my man?
Hey, how you doing? I am so happy to be here talking with
Awesome.
you today.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, Aaron Holmes. Did I say it right?
Yes, sir. That's got it.
Aaron Holmes, pilot extraordinaire. Been in the game for a minute. You are, as we call it, pro pilot and airline pilot. You're running with the big
Wow,
dogs.
appreciate it. Well, appreciate it. I don't know about the big dogs yet, but we are certainly very humble and very glad to be here.
Dude, you're a jet pilot. I'm still a piston pilot, so in my opinion, you're with the big dogs.
Hey, we were all piston pilots at first.
That's right. That's right. So, Aaron, the way I met you was a few summers ago at a pilot job fair, which was pretty cool. You were one of the more laid-back, cool guys that I met there. And I remember that you had two different type of business cards. You had like a normal, standard, like phone number, rectangular, this is me, this is my data. And then after our conversation, you handed me a square business card, which is like a very cool, colorful graphic. And it was like more of a social media, hey, hit me up on socials. And I thought that was pretty dope, man, because that's like, there's, two types of communication. Either let's keep it professional, kind of LinkedIn style, or like, yo, hit me up on socials. We're cool. Let's like go get a beer, maybe, like that kind of vibe.
Yeah, and I think it's cool to show some personality because I do think because even on my rectangular business cards, I have clouds on them. There's a picture that I took, and one of my favorite pictures that I ever took. I'm a photographer as well in some of my spare time. So I use that on my card versus just a white, a white background. So I feel like it's important to show a little bit of personality and kind of stand out from your peers in small ways, right? That can still be professional, but also unique.
Dude, I love it. And it was, like I said, it was really cool talking to you that day. We've stayed in touch ever since via social media.
I'm so glad.
And a couple of face-to-face run-ins just by chance. We'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk really quick. So you were at an airline, and then how did you get into being the face of the company and going to these events? And how many of those did you do? Because I saw you at it was just, I think it's FAPA, as we call it.
FAPA.
Yeah, and you came to North Carolina a couple summers ago. So how many of those did you do?
Yeah, Zia, I would never say I was the face of the company by any means, but I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to represent the company at various recruiting events, and I did quite a few of them, thankfully. The first one that I did was OBAP, and that was in New Orleans here a couple of years ago, and so that was the first one that I was able to do for them. I did a couple of FAPA events. So I guess for people who don't know what these are, OBAP is Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, and then FAPA is Future and Active Pilot Advisors. So they have, FAPA has monthly events around the country to bring employers to the face of prospective pilots, or it doesn't have to be just pilots, but aviation jobs as a whole. And so that's right, where we met there, the one in Charlotte. It was one of my favorite ones that I did.
Dude, killer. Since we're already here, we'll kind of jump into things, and then we'll go back to your origin story in a minute. But we got FAPA, as you talked. There's OBAP. There's Latin Pilot Association. There's Women in Aviation. There's all these organizations, and everybody now that I'm in the interview process looking for a gig somewhere, everybody says join these organizations. And I have one question. Obviously, I'm just a regular old white dude. So if I go and join, for example, Women in Aviation or any of the other organizations, right? Like, I'm not of that class, but it seems like everybody just joins these things anyways, and they go to these events. So like, what's the play there? Like, what should people do, and how do you be respectful but partake? I just have so many questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, to me, I think the big piece is it doesn't really matter what you look like. The whole point of being in these organizations, right, is to help promote and provide an opportunity for people with different demographics the opportunity to be a part of aviation, right? So they do a lot of outreach, they do a lot of scholarships. I can speak to OBAP, Organizational Black Aerospace Professionals, and some of the things that they do are the ACE camps, right? So those are events that are held across the country, usually in the summer, on a summer day, where they have the opportunity, where kids have the opportunity to come out and either get on an airplane and be able to talk to pilots, talk to mechanics, or talk to air traffic controllers, or go visit whatever their local companies are. And that is just the opportunity to see someone who looks like them doing something that they like to do. And to me, that's super important, because sometimes when people come from, whatever their background is, they may not have a chance to see that kind of thing, or they may not even know that's something that they can do. That's even a possibility. So when you have groups like, NGPA, National Gay Pilots Association, or Women in Aviation International, WAI, and OBAP, as I just talked about, those groups are there trying to promote adding more people to the industry and providing opportunity. By no means is it taking away from anybody. And regardless of what you look like, you can go to these events. I've been fortunate to be able to attend multiple of them. You just talked about LPA, Latino Professionals in Aerospace. That was just this past weekend in Orlando. So that was really cool to attend and see just how each group, how each organization has their national conference.
Wicked, man. Yeah, so I don't know. I was confused at first, like, should I go? Should I not go? But yeah, I guess I'm going to have to head out to some more of these events. Definitely I could put some microphones in some people's faces and get some cool stories, at least for the podcast.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, people think that that's preventing, or that that's going to that should stop them from going. And no, it's quite the opposite. It's a space for people to celebrate, whatever their background, their demographic is, right? But by no means is that excluding anyone. It's just simply a space for people to come together and celebrate the wonderful world of aviation that we have a privilege to be a part of.
I love it, man. Okay, well, you've inspired me. I'm going to go try to hit up some more of these events, but let's get back to you, and let's start at the beginning. Let's hear your origin story, aviation. How'd you pick it? Why this crazy world? What made you want to get into this?
Yeah, so here we are. We are 8 years in into all this flying stuff, but it started much earlier than that. My dad is retired military, and he was in the Navy, and so that really helped provide me the presence of aviation. He wasn't a pilot, but he enjoyed going to air shows. So with my childhood, I resonate a lot with the opportunity to go to air shows with him and be able to share that with my siblings, and just see stuff moving around as a kid. We lived not too far from DCA, Ronald Reagan National Airport, in Washington, D.C. So I was able to go to Gravelly Point, the locals, the people who know. That is the spot to be there at DCA. And then where we live now, I'm underneath one of the arrivals for the big international airport that's local to me. So it's been around for a long time, and I've had fortune that I was able to explore that.
So even as a kid, were you good at plane spotting? You knew the difference between every airline, just from far away? Because I'm the worst at that. People are like, oh, what kind of plane is that? I go, I don't know, one with two wings on it. I cannot tell the difference between airliners. I'm the worst. But some guys are like, oh, that's a 737-7 because of the way the wheels fold out, and you can tell this one little panel on the side wing there. And I'm like, dude, I couldn't find. Yeah, So were you like that as a kid?
I was one of those kids. I'm
Good.
a really big visual person. So I loved trying to get the books, trying to get the Legos, watching videos back when they were on CD. Now, I'm not that old by any means, and I'm not claiming anyone to be old or young, but, the YouTube was not available
right
at first. And so I remember getting one of the most exciting things that I ever got was this like DVD collection from Boeing, of their process of building their airplanes. And I remember just watching that through, trying to watch any of the specials I could on the History Channel on cable, just all sorts of stuff, right? Just whatever I could get my hands on, the Legos, looking in the books. I ended up drawing airplanes. So that really helped bring my attention to detail, like you said, for these small things that identify a 737-700 from an 800.
I love it, man. That's awesome. It goes to show in your career now because you really were an aviation guy from the get go. I know what you mean though about finding some old tapes. My mom had King's private pilot classes on
Yeah, there you
VHS.
go.
On
King
VHS, bro.
schools.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Martha Stack on VHS, dude. It was hilarious. I remember watching those as a kid with her. Yeah.
I love it.
Okay, man. So you had some aviation in your blood just from an early age. So when did you start your pilot training?
So for me, that we didn't have any sort of aviation background, so didn't grow up with any family members who were pilots or really working in aviation the way that I do today. So a lot of it was just like any chances I could go to the airport and watch airplanes, or I was excited when we went on vacation. But that's still a far bridge to a gap there that we had to bridge to actually being inside the cockpit. So my mom, thankfully, she has been one of my biggest supporters as well, both of my parents. But she was like, "Hey, I heard about this class that's at Medina, and you could go and take the ground school." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, well, what is that like?" I mean, and so I was just very curious, and I wasn't sure. So being able to go and be there and sit in ground school, private pilot ground school, I had really very little of what was going on and what I was doing, but I knew that I was like, okay, this is something I'd be interested in. I had a discovery flight, did that for my 16th birthday, so I was able to actually go inside the airplane and fly it. And we just kept going with that. When it came time to graduate high school and I was looking at colleges to attend, I was looking at the places that had aviation programs. So again, thank you to my mom for helping me out with that kind of research. And I settled on Bowling Green State University to do my undergrad and did all my training there.
Nice. So you did, yeah, all of your training while at college. And what was that like? I just curious because I had no interest in aviation until I was almost 30. So in college, I was like your regular, just idiot kid. I joined a fraternity. I got a simple business degree. I did a lot more learning out of the classroom than in the classroom, if you catch my drift. So I'm really curious what it's like with the college experience. You have all this social stuff, but then on top of that, now you have flight training. So I'm sure it kind of guides you in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was choosing the school, I mean, it was between Bowling Green, Kent State, Ohio State, and nothing against those other schools. And we're fortunate that there's a lot of options within the state of Ohio, and I think I chose what I thought was the best pick for me. So people don't forget about that portion, right? I mean, you still have to, even just because they have the program that you want, they may not be the place that you want to be at to do the program, right? So I found the right fit for me there. It was just far enough from home, but not too close, right? I could still go home,
That's
and
perfect.
and
Perfect.
then right, you still go home, but then your parents can't just pop up on you and be like, "Hi," So
Yep.
that really helped out, and then I just had a really good feeling about the program. And when I was being shown, the way that they involved me in my tour process, I don't know if they still do this, but at the time I did a ride along in one of the flight lessons, so that was really cool to kind of
Dude,
see
that's
and feel that
incredible.
out. So that was cool to just to see yourself in that space in that environment, because I did a couple of flight lessons prior to coming to college or going to college, and I realized quickly that I was not going to be able to continue affording that. So I was going to have to wait for college and to use the scholarships or student loan process to help afford that. So that was also another piece, the financial aspect. Um, but once I made it there, I mean, there's still the social portion, right? You still have the academic portion. You got to balance all of that, and I feel like I've found a good line.
Dude, kudos to you because I really don't think I could have done it. Even after I graduated college, I moved out west and I went out to be a ski bum and just work for 4 years, and I already had a degree. So it was like, I was still working, but I was also a ski bum, and there was a local college there. And I was like, thank God I didn't go to school here because it would take me like 10 years to get an undergraduate. I'd be out on the ski hill all the time. So the fact that, guys like you, everybody that attends these aviation universities and can balance school, fun, and flight training, like that's a lot, dude, at a young age. So kudos, man.
Well, I think that, and I think that's a big piece is that some people do need to learn how to do that, right? So they get out of the house and they could have a very supportive home or not, whatever their situation is. But when you are away from home in whatever fashion, right? That forces you to grow up a little bit, right? You have to go find your own dinner, you got to do your own laundry, right? You got to manage your own time. And a lot of those are really good, valuable lessons. And I'm thankful that I had that. I loved my college experience, and it taught me a lot outside of the cockpit, but as well inside the cockpit. So we would have our normal weekly schedule of doing your psych and soc and whatever, algebra, right, math, whatever you needed, right. But then we would also have our flight lessons that are built into the weekly schedule, 3 slots a week. They could be a ground, it could be a sim, or it could be a flight. So that was really cool to me as well to work that in.
Incredible, man. Sounds like a busy workload, but so I'm guessing that was a 141 program, right?
Yeah, it was part 141 program, and so for the people who don't know, and just to explain a little bit of difference, the 141 programs typically are a little bit more regimented, a little bit more of a syllabus focus. Part 61 can kind of be a little bit more choose your own adventure. By no means is it any less quality training. It's just two different ways to approach the same path.
Yeah, and we'll get into that more later on when we talk about you kind of going back to CFI life. Uh, I'm more of a 61 guy. I've never experienced 141, but just from, and I don't even know it from at a university level. I think probably 141 at a university is the best place to do that type of program. I'm just talking from like ATP and some of these other big box stores.
Sure.
But anyways, so, while you're in the university, because one thing is struggling for your psych test or your math test. Another thing is struggling in your aviation training. So was there ever moments where you were like, man, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to like get the next license, or did everybody kind of help you along the way? Just be like, Aaron, you got this, buddy. Like, we're going to make it. How did it go?
I was really fortunate to have a really good support group, and I'm really thankful to have the type of friend groups that I had, to have the type of mentors that I had, to have the type of professors and things like that, that made all the difference. So I'm really thankful for those individuals and the help that I received, because I certainly didn't know it all, and I never will claim to. There was times where I got humbled, and I was challenged, but I was also excited because now in college, like, you're doing what you are choosing to do, right? You're not forced to be there. So if you aren't excited about what you chose for your program, you're probably not doing the right program. And I understand that sometimes it takes people a little bit of time to kind of find their path and figure out what works for them. But I was excited to be there. And so they say for any course really, but for every hour inside the classroom, you should be spending 2 or 3 outside of the classroom studying or reviewing stuff. And now that's not always realistic for everything, right? All the time. But I do think that's very realistic for aviation, and that especially in the beginning when you're still just learning your private pilot or your instrument, you're gonna have to spend some time. It's
Yeah.
not just gonna, money doesn't just grow in trees, just like the knowledge all of a sudden isn't just gonna pop into your brain. Like you're gonna have to spend some time working with that. Whether that be, in some fashion, figuring out how you study best, if that's in a group setting, if that's in a more personal setting, but you got to find something to work for you.
Great words of advice. I'm sure you're going to be spitting nothing but knowledge this whole episode for all of us, because, dude, you've been doing it. So, all right. I'm guessing also too, was it a restricted ATP? You graduated with an RATP?
When I appreciate the kind words there, but yeah, the restricted ATP, so was eligible for my airline transport pilot license at 1,000 hours.
Yeah, it's shaving off 500 hours. Huge. I love it. All right, so you whizzed through college. You did wonderful. You're a studious guy. You got all your licenses. You just graduated. It's the next day after this big achievement in life, and now you're sitting and thinking to yourself like, man, what am I going to do now? So what did you do?
Yeah, it was really exploiting those connections that I made. So I was fortunate to be involved in different student orgs. Alpha Theta Rho, which is, you talked about a fraternity. Alpha Theta Rho is the International Aviation Fraternity. Um, I was in Aviation Ambassadors, which is the organization that helped provide tours to students, and then Flight Team, part of NIFA, National Intercollegiate Flying Association. And so I made a lot of friends within my own school and then at other schools through those organizations. And so that was really helpful when it came time to look at jobs or prospects, because we had a chance to go visit some companies, go um, whether it was a corporate or the airline side. And for me, it was choosing the airline track. So how could I get myself there? CFI seemed to be the best track for me. So I did mm, private instrument, commercial single, commercial multi, CFI, MEI, and then I finished my double I elsewhere, but I started it there in Bowling Green. So I was able to go and get those items to help become a CFI then after graduation, and then did a little bit of part-time corporate work as well to build my time.
Oh, dang, really? Okay, cool. So where were you teaching? Were you just kind of independent, or did you go to a flight school?
So I did it originally at two places. Um, I did it at a flight club that was on the airfield, and then I did it at a different Part 61 location elsewhere, and I just made that work until it was time to move on. So I was juggling those two flight schools and then doing the part-time corporate work, and that was just an opportunity that I was able to find by working at the FBO that was on the airfield there, where I did my training in Bowling Green. So they flew a TBM and a PC-12, and so the guy that
Sick.
was flying, I think it's one of the best airplanes I've ever flown. Some of the most fun. The guy I was flying with was a CFI. He kept his CFI up, and so we were able to. I was able to ride along with him and eventually start doing some flying, continuously with him in their company whenever they saw fit.
Dude, that's killer. Those two are both on my bucket list. I haven't hit the TBM yet, but last year and a little bit of this year, I met a guy, and retired airline guy, who was just, he was flying a Pilatus for a family, and I was like, bro, I will mow your lawn for a month. Like, please just let me ride along. And this guy was so cool. And the Pilatus, for me as like a first big turbine, it was just so fun to be at the controls. I didn't think he was going to let me do much, but we had to reposition it like at literally 17 miles, airport to airport. So he let me do the taxi, and I was like, okay, your controls. He was like, no, you're going to take off. And I took off. And then, like, as we're approaching the next airport, like 3 minutes later, I was like, okay, your controls. He was like, nah, man, you're going to land it. And he just talked me through it. And those Pilatuses are fun, man. I've talked to some guys at Plane Sense, one of them on the podcast. And yeah, dude, Pilatus, love them, man.
Dude, they are the suburban of the skies. And turboprops in general, I think, are so much easier than people think they are. They are so simple. Yes, they may burn Jet A, and there's a couple more systems associated, pressurization, high altitude, complex, whatever. But when it comes down to it, just fly like any other airplane,
Hey,
right? And I'm
dude.
gonna use I'm gonna use that same theme, later for the jets. But yeah, I got my high altitude and high performance endorsement in the TBM, and then when they moved on to the PC-12, then it was just a matter of like, okay, just a slightly bigger airplane, but that was a really nice bridge of the gap between any sort of single engine piston, or even piston multi-aircraft to going to something that burns Jet A and jet engines. So.
Yeah, I like what you said about turboprops. I just got back from a week of King Air training. Uh,
Oh
uh,
yeah, that's right.
it was cool. At first, it was like overwhelming, and I'm like, how does a turbine engine work? And by the end of the week, I was like, yeah, you just flick a bunch of extra switches, make some extra
Right.
checks, but it still flies like a plane. So,
Right. Like, you pull back, you go up, you push forward, you go down,
that's
you push
right.
the throttles forward, you go faster. So it's just the same kind of stuff. And I always I remember telling some of my friends about that I was mentoring. It was like, dude, you will love it if you have the opportunity to do it. And I really hope that you can.
100%, brother. All right, so let's get back to CFI life. You finished college with, I don't know, let's say what, about 300 hours or so?
Yeah, about that. It was I did a lot of renting as I was going through. I was super excited to, you're private pilot, and one of the first things, right, you're gonna do is go take your friends or whoever is important to you to go flying. Like, yeah, I can do this now. So I did a lot of renting to help, and so I was about 300, maybe 350. Um, and so being CFI, it was some challenges there. I was thankful nonetheless to be paid to fly an airplane, right? And it was really cool to do that. But certainly working as an independent at two Part 61 kind of operations, the paperwork and the paperwork and organization of things is it can be daunting at first, right? And so you're trying to keep your students straight and make sure you're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. It can be a challenge.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm an independent 61 guy myself, and I like it that way because when I charge somebody money, it's like it all goes to me versus through a flight school. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? I don't, we can get into all that unethical stuff at another date. But, anyways, like, I teach a lot of folks that are like me. They don't have a ton of money, but this is their passion. And I made a deal with every single one of my students. I'll only charge you Hobbs time. If you want to do ground, like before and after, that's on the house, unless it's something major, like, uh, cross country navigation, where we're gonna have to sit down for like 2 hours and for me to explain stuff. Then I charge that. But I just rather see my students progress because I want to get my gold seal. I only need one more student to go to check
Oh,
ride.
you're so close.
I'm so close, and that's like been my last goal that I really want to accomplish in piston world before I really just dive into jets and turbine life and all that. So, but let's talk about you. So your CFI life, you built 700 something hours between that and a little bit of these high performance airplanes. So do you have any like fond memories of some students, maybe your first one that you prepared for check ride, or what were some hurdles? Let's talk about all that CFI life for a minute.
Yeah. So I did, like I said, I did Part 61 at two different places, and eventually I moved and did Part 141 for a university in Minnesota. So I kind of had the best of both worlds, and then being a student of a 141, a product of 141 program, but then a renter at a 61. Like, so I was fortunate to kind of see both sides and experience it from different angles that really helped impact my ability to teach. And you always, you're CFI, so you get those people that you enjoyed flying with so much, and those are the people that you're trying to emulate when it comes time to teach your students, right? So that's what I really honed in on. Is like some of these people. One of my favorite guys, the guy who soloed me, right? He's at United now. My favorite instructor. I always had a good time flying with him. Had him for multiple of my ratings before he moved on to the airlines himself. But those types of people stick with you. And so I remember the first student that I soloed, and man, you're sweating.
Oh man,
It is so challenging.
bro,
You know,
hundred
like
percent,
people always say, like, who's more nervous, the student or the instructor? The instructor, a thousand
hundred
percent.
thousand percent. I'll tell you really quickly why I was so nervous. My first student, she was a 17-year-old girl in high school. And this girl was born to be a pilot. She is phenomenal. I remember like the first time we ever had a crosswind component, I showed her what to do once, and the next three, like it was a strong crosswind. Next three landings, she just aced it, dude. Set it down on the same spot every time. I was like, kid, you were born to be a pilot. But the day of her cross country solo, I'm watching Flight Aware, and I'm also texting her dad, who's also a private pilot. And I'm like, okay, she landed at the first one. And he's like, yeah, she said she was safe. And we were both like, oh, man, please. But it went well.
That's cool that you get to share that with him
Yeah.
and as a family affair.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And we're still super tight friends. I'm helping her get CFI right now. But anyways, back to you, brother. I keep stealing the spotlight.
No, no, dude. Like, then I think it's all part of the conversation because I feel even though I'm a unique person, my experiences are not always the quite, most unique things. But I do feel like there's a lot of overlaps and people can resonate. When I'm sitting in someone's jump seat or sitting next to someone at 30,000 feet, we're talking about the same stuff, right?
Sick.
Um,
We'll get into that
so
later. I'm going to write that
Right,
down.
right. We'll get there. But the point being, like, some of those experiences are certainly ones that I feel a lot of people can resonate with, and if they haven't, they will one day. And I certainly encourage people taking their own journey and doing their own path, but there's just going to be some overlaps, right? There's only so many ways. We're all going to have to solo, and we're all going to probably send someone solo if we do become a CFI.
All right, so you personally, what do you prefer teaching, Part 141 or 61?
like you said, there's pros and cons to both. What I appreciated was like you talked about on the financial aspect, right? It's cool to know that if you're going to charge someone X amount of time and money, that's just going straight to you. Um, but there just comes with more responsibility, the record keeping and organization of that. And making sure that you, like you said, you're charging what is a fair rate, and especially at first, like you have no idea like what your value is. Like you're trying to like ask other people, like, man, what are you charging? Like, so you try to figure out how to set that. I settled somewhere and made it work. And even my students, they were like, you could probably get more. I was like, I probably could, but I'm humble in the fact that I know I'm still trying to figure this out. And I'm not gonna, like you said, I'm not here to gouge you for the money. I want to make sure it's quality training, but I'm not gonna, overstay my welcome there in terms of my worth. So the 141 environment is nice though, in that when you're at scale, there's a lot of support network. If an airplane breaks, there's probably another one of the same configuration,
That's true.
the same model that you can probably go jump into. Or the place that I was able to teach at, um, I mean, it was an all-day affair, flying. We were good enough that we could have, or big enough that we could have morning and evening shift. And so I'm a night owl, so that was perfect. I was able to get the night shift, which then meant I got to a point of only teaching instrument and commercial students, right? So that was really helpful later to help kind of prevent some of the burnout, because
Yeah.
if you're doing privates all the time, nothing wrong with it. Again, we all got to start somewhere. But when you don't have to teach someone the basics of like, this is how we taxi and this is how we flare, when you can move on to, this is how we can hold a course with a little bit of wind, right? This is how you fine tune this minutia to get the most performance out of the chandelle, right, on your commercial. To me, that was exciting.
I love it, dude. Yeah, you're not wrong. I've gone through a big cycle and I've gotten a bunch of my kids all the way up to commercial. And now I have like a big cycle again of primary. And just a couple of folks we've been struggling for a while, but it's good because I didn't even solo until I had about 45 hours, and I took my private pilot at 92 hours. So
Yeah.
I've been okay with like repeating the pattern for the last 17 lessons in a row, just to help you figure out, when do I flare? Like that last 5% of the landing is the most difficult part, and since I struggled for so long, I do like to help people with that because I remember what it was like. And I've had students like cry and be like, am I really going to do like, are you just being nice? Do I need to quit? And I'm like, no, you can do this. And we've pushed past it. And now she's now she's doing cross country solo. So, I love those aha moments, but
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. I mean, because I certainly have had those moments with students, and especially when you're just starting at a school, sometimes you may not have, when you start on this Monday, there may not be a student who's ready to start on that Monday with you, and so you're often going to be filling in for the other CFIs who are already there, right? If they get sick or if they have some overflow, or I remember one of my first lessons I did was a guy for his check ride prep. I'm like, I I mean, I know what the tolerances are, right, for these maneuvers, but I'm still so new to this school. Like, I don't know how you guys do this. Like, but I think that they thought that was good because it was a completely objective view of, hey, like you either he meets the standard or he's not, right? And that's kind of what you're expecting on a check ride. So that was one of my first lessons. And you just kind of eventually find your stride and you settle in and figure out what your groove is.
I love it, man. So obviously you kicked butt at the flight school as you helped some people reach their goals. You know what's really funny is, like you said, you had this one instructor who you had the best time with. He's always stayed in your mind.
Yep.
And we all have that. We all have that one voice of that instructor, right? Who's like, add right rudder, or hey, flare, 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 or do whatever, right? You always have that instructor that voice that stayed in your mind. For me, it was my dad, and he's Latin, and so he has this accent, and he's like, Nicolas, fly the plane slower, and so he's always in my voice. That voice is always in my head. And I turned around and I was telling some of my students that one day, and they all looked at me and they were like, Nick, your voice is in our head. And I was like, oh no, I feel so bad for you guys because I'm like a dummy, dude. I'm not the voice that you need in your head. But it is funny how like now you and I, like our voices are in someone's head and they think that we were like the
Absolutely.
best and we were just trying to figure it out, you know?
I think that's some of the cool part is like the impact, right? I certainly, I think it's sometimes it's easy to forget the fact that we were once on the other side, and now you switch over and you're on the CFI side, and eventually, if you make it to the pro pilot, level, whatever that may be, corporate airlines, whatever, but you were once one of those other people, and so I really try to be cognizant of that, keep that present of mind, right? If I'm taxiing around and regardless of what airplane I'm in, if it has a propeller in the front burning avgas or is there turbines behind me, I'm still waving to someone who's sitting over there, right? I'm gonna still wave to the kid or wave to the other airplane because I remember there was a time when I was on the other side and I wanted them to wave to me, So those little things that I think can go such a long way. And the same with your students. Like you talk about keeping in touch with your student there your first with those solo cross country. I mean, I still love keeping in touch with my students and checking in on them. They still send me their updates, right? Hey, I just passed this check ride. Talk about like for example, you, Mr. Morris, congratulations on the MEI.
Hey,
So like so people like that where it is really cool to hear those updates and to see that progress and to know your name is in their logbook and it was a positive experience. And I'm sure I've flown with people who didn't like flying with me, and that's just going to be the case, right?
right.
It's not going to be a perfect fit for everyone, but
Yeah.
um, we're not perfect, but you try your best to be.
Yeah, because we're just trying to figure it out too. We're growing. Maybe when we're the old heads, we'll have it all down pat. We'll be the best CFI in the world. But until then, we're gonna keep it moving. So you get through CFI, you build those hours. You got the restricted ATP, so around 1,000 hours, you start applying to places. Okay, and you landed somewhere. You were flying a CRJ 200, which is pretty sweet. You got a type rating out of it, right?
Yep, yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the interview process. Did you use an interview prep packet, like one of those big companies that we all know the name of?
Yeah, so at the time, so for the context, I graduated college December 2020. So I was at the end of the COVID cycle. Things were still coming back to being in person, but it wasn't normal per se yet. But it was starting to be once we got into the 2021. And then we kind of we're starting to get the big hiring boom for places going into 2022. And I was like, I was hustling. I was trying to hustle so I could catch that wave that I was seeing, where the bonuses were coming out of thin air for people, for first officers and captains alike. And the pay raises were coming because, most famously, um, one of the first regionals, right, that decided, maybe we should increase our pay, and then everyone started to follow from that, right? So I started applying in the early, maybe like spring of 2022. Was able to get a couple of interviews, but so now my background of why it took me ended up so I started in the spring and I was able to finally get a class date in December of 2022. So I reached my ATP minimums in September, and I was able to cut a class date in December. But I got turned down from a couple places because I have two check ride failures and I have an incident on my record. I own that. I have no problem ever talking about those things. My commercial multi and then my CFI single engine add-on. So those items and then my incident, experiencing some wind shear on takeoff and having a runway excursion, that made it a little bit tougher for me to get some of the attention at first. But as you were talking about some of those big companies, I used one of the gouges that was really nice. And it was just one of the websites, cheaper, but it
Yeah.
wasn't free, but it was cheaper and at least more affordable in my CFI, budget.
Yep.
But that was super helpful in preparing for the interviews. And I just had friends or family members just read me the questions and I would answer them as if I was sitting right in front of the table.
Yeah, I think we're talking aviationinterviews.com. If anybody has not found that just by Googling, how do I help or how do I prepare for my interview as an airline pilot? Bro, you got to get on aviationinterviews.com. Like, it's been around.
Yes, absolutely.
It's been around for decades, and it's just like all the questions you could ever imagine, and then people writing down their answers. So let's get right into that because I'm the same way as you. I've had 2 check ride failures. For me, it's a little worse because it was my CFI and then my CFII. So if anybody reads me on paper, they're probably like, damn, this guy must be the worst instructor, like he's not qualified to teach. And yet here I am helping people get their license. So how did you address the check ride failure question? Because I also have to do it, and I'm curious, what's your way around it?
Yeah, and I always sort of think like just because you fail a check ride doesn't mean you're not a good pilot. A lot of people have failures, and in fact, I think it makes people more humble when they do have a failure. Now, there's people who haven't had any, and I don't think they're a bad pilot either, right? But it's all about how you shape that experience. So on the application, they're going to ask if you have had any such occurrences or incidents, accidents, and of course, like if you've had them, you got to own it because they'll find out. They're really just checking to make sure you're going to be honest.
100%.
like they already know the answer. By the time if you do get called for an interview and you show up, like they already know the answer, but they're just trying to make sure that um, that they know. So when it comes time to talk about it, a lot of it's just kind of leveraging what the experience was, what you learned from it, and how you do better by it, right? So for my CFI single gen add-on, right? So I failed because I came up short of my power off 180. Um, I was teaching too much. I wasn't flying the airplane, so I turned late, and I knew it. I knew as soon as I was like, "Darn, I don't know if I'm going to make this." Right? I'm thinking of that in my head. So when it come time to talk about in these interviews, I just use that as experience to say like I learned to have a better balance between the teaching aspect and being able to instruct, but obviously our primary thing is always to aviate, fly the airplane first. So that has helped me when it comes time to being a part of a flight crew because there's going to be times where we're going to be talking about something or something's going on, but we still got to remember like who's flying the plane. There's been a lot of unfortunate accidents where someone was not definitively flying the airplane and it led to unfortunate injury or loss of life as a result. So I just use that as a way to help, leverage and build off of that and turn it into something positive. It's not the DP's fault, it was my fault.
I think that's an excellent way to address that question. Man, I think I might steal it from you. That's a great way to get past that one. The other one that I have a question about is in every interview, there's always a tell me about a time when question. So for me,
Sure.
It was tell me about a time when you and a captain had a disagreement on something. And man, I'm so laid back in the cockpit. I really don't care who's right or who's wrong. I just care what's the safest. And so I told this story of I was flying with this guy, pretty grumpy guy who owns a flight school, and yeah,
Seems to be a lot of those grumpy guys out there.
Dude, and this guy, he's one of those guys where he's always right, and so
Sure.
and that's how the story goes. We were taxiing, and Tower said, "Hold short of runway or taxiway Charlie." It goes taxiway Charlie and Delta that crosses in front of us on taxiway Alpha, and so I was like, "Hey." Tower said, "Hold short of Charlie." And he was like, "No, they said hold short of Delta." And I was like, "Well, let's just confirm." So I called Tower. I was like, "Hey, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we need to hold short of Charlie or Delta?" And they're like, "Hold short of Charlie, please." And I was like, "Okay, holding short of Charlie." So I looked over at him and I was like, "Hey, we're going to hold here." I don't care. At that moment, I don't care anymore because it's not who's right or who's wrong. It's just we're doing what's safest.
Sure. Absolutely.
This guy's like, "Man, I swear to God, they said to hold short of Delta. I'm writing down the time. We're going to go look at live ATC. The Tower miss said that, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, oh, goodness. So I shared that story in an interview. And then my lovely little HR lady, she was like, "So did you have a debrief about that later?" And I was like, "No, honestly, because it didn't really impact the flight much. We resolved the issue quickly. And we just went about our day, and I just let stuff roll off my back. Like, again, I don't care. Whatever is the safest way. It doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong." And she's like, "So you didn't have a debrief?" I was like, "No." She's like, "So you didn't talk about it later?" I was like, "No." "So you didn't talk about it another time?" And in that moment, I'm like, obviously she wants me to say, "Oh, actually, so we did have a debrief." But I thought, okay, you've asked me 3 times, and 3 times I've told you no. If I say yes now, I'm lying, right? So it's like,
Sure.
what do I do? Anyways, you give me your tell me about a time when scenario, and how do you kind of parlay it in the interview process?
Yeah, and that's hard because you want to be honest, but you also feel like you want to give the right answer. But I'm always going to err on the side like, do the honesty, make sure that it's accurate, don't lie just to embellish the story. But definitely understand like what it is that you're saying and how that can impact, right, that conversation. So certainly I've had my tell me at about at times, with captains, and there's one in particular that I remember flying with where we were gonna be potentially overweight for landing, right? So we have that issue now in the transport category aircraft, right? And a lot of light aircraft, your max takeoff weight is typically your max landing weight, conveniently. But in a lot of transport category aircraft, it can be quite the separation. And so in the CRJ 200, it's about I can't remember, 6 or 7 thousand pound difference, right? Between what your max takeoff and what your max landing is. So on that particular day, a little bit of a longer leg, Chicago to Sioux Falls, and we had an alternate of Minneapolis. So it's not far, but it's not close. It turned out we didn't need the alternate, so we had this extra gas, right? That's going to be on board, right? That we needed legally, but now it's going to become a problem when it comes time for the landing weight. 47,000 pounds. This is the max landing weight. We we were coming out of the descent, and I'm the pilot monitoring, right? So the captain's the pilot flying, I'm the pilot monitoring, and I'm running the numbers for the landing data, and I'm like, huh, this is a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. So I remember looking over and just saying like, hey, like just bring it to our attention, right? That's the first thing we got to communicate about it. Hey, I'm just running some numbers. I'm looking at this. I think this might be a little bit close. If you want to, get down lower sooner, right? Getting lower burns more gas, right? Or we configure early, like throw the flaps or the gear out sooner. That burns more gas, adds more drag. Or let's just do anything, right? To help make this a little bit different, right? Don't get direct to the airfield. Can we get a delay vector, right? Just something to help make the flight a little bit longer, to burn more gas. And this gentleman was just, he was not having it. Like he was like, we're gonna stay high until we, because we're going into an outstation, right? So we're gonna stay high until we actually have to go down, and it was gonna be a visual approach, which means you weren't gonna fly the full procedure and burn, more time or gas. Like, so it just came to the point where we're on final and we're still not quite in agreement. The airplane's still not quite in agreement that we were going to be underneath our landing weight between the two devices that we had to tell this. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm just checking like one more time, like, okay, I think we're going to be all right. But then he reaches over and moves one of the screens back to the page that we need for landing. And I'm like, dude, you're flying the airplane. We're here on final. And so now you're reaching over and you're upset because I'm trying to make sure that both of our certs are not on the line because we have an overweight landing, right? That's something that's completely avoidable. Now, with the company's not going to go and fire us over that or anything like that, right? But it could just be a discussion. It might be an ASAP report, that kind of thing. And he just had a hard time, at least from my perspective, he just had a hard time because I think he felt like I was challenging him in that regard, and whatever he thought that we were going to be okay, and he just had to push it, right? He had to take the shortcut. He had to take the visual approach. He didn't want to configure early. Like he did all these things that unnecessarily back us into this corner. Now, was it going to be something where there was a huge safety of flight? Was the airplane going to fall apart? Was someone going to get hurt? No, right? The airplane's gonna, I promise the airplane's gonna handle that weight if for some reason we were only a couple pounds over, but it's something completely unavoidable and that you don't need to break this limitation. So when it came time to it, I just allowed that to happen there in final, right? Because we're in a critical phase of flight. We land, we go into the gate, and the last item on the checklist, before we open the cockpit door is debrief. And I remember looking to him, was like, hey, I really didn't appreciate the fact that you reached over and did that, right? When I was just trying to confirm and make sure that it was okay, one more time, before we commit to the landing. And then he just starts going off because he wasn't going to say anything. right? He wasn't gonna say anything about it. He was just gonna we were just gonna go to the hotel and enjoy Sioux Falls, South Dakota, for all it's worth, right? I brought it up because I was like, I don't think there's any reason to have any sort of animosity or uh, just problem between us, right? Um,
Honestly,
and
bro,
he
yeah, it took some brass balls to say that because I know myself, and I'm kind of like a people pleaser, and I may have just swept it under the rug. So great job that you brought it up, and kind of putting that guy in his place because it was unnecessary, as you said. So let's hear more of it. Let's hear about the debrief.
Yeah, I mean, just in the debrief, like, and so now you're just again, you're just communicating, you're just starting the conversation. Where it goes, right? You have no idea where it's going to go when you open that can of worms. But our passengers are getting off the airplane. We're still having our conversation, right? Door's still closed. And he's trying to go off and thinks, he's saying he didn't think it was necessary, and just trying to explain like why he wasn't a fan. And I said, I understand that. I think that's valuable, and by no means am I questioning. You've got the fourth stripe for a reason, right? I respect that. But that's where I was the reason why I did what I did. This is why, and that's what made me uncomfortable, right? Um, and just being able to have that open discussion. Now, what I also didn't appreciate in that debrief, the way that he handled it, was that he was deciding to ask me a question, right? And he's like, so, whatever, blah, blah. And so I'm going to respond. And then he starts talking again, talking over me. So I'm like, so then at some point I just got to the point, it's like, well, I'm not going to have this conversation if it's not a two-way conversation, right? Either you're going to ask me the question, allow me a chance to then respond to what you just said, right? Or I'm just going to sit here and listen to you. But I mean, I'm not going to allow myself to be talked. Like, we're not going to be a screaming match. It's not worth that, right? So
Did you end up putting him
it's
on
just
your?
funny to see.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm curious. Did you put him on your no-fly list?
Unfortunately, at my carrier, we didn't have that kind of
Oh,
option.
bullshit! What the hell?
Oh man, I know they didn't have a. There, you could try it a bit around people, but or try to drop trips or things. But if I saw someone that maybe I wasn't as fond of, to me, I was just kind of like, gonna go to work, right?
Yeah,
I still gotta go fly,
yeah.
and to me, it was better about the flight time and the financial impact if I were to say, you know what, I don't want to fly with this person, and blah blah blah.
But you said something really honest there. He may be possibly putting two certificates at risk. So you do need to pipe up. You do need to kind of keep everybody accountable. So hey, man,
Right. I want someone to challenge me if I'm making a mistake. If I'm there's been times where I've gotten close to busting the 250 below 10. Dude, tell me to pull the power back. Like, I'm not gonna be upset. Like, tell me to slow down, right?
of course,
So
yeah.
I think that's important to have that kind of, open and honest discussion between crew members.
And I think and I'm the same way. Like if somebody even just says like, "Hey, center your heading bug" or whatever, and if it was something I was going to do, but I'm just 3 seconds behind mentally because I was flying the plane, I say, "Hey, thank you," correcting or whatever, because it's important to show, I think, to your co-pilot or to your captain, like, "Hey, I'm not butthurt by your correction, and let's continue to work as a team." So yeah, like let's keep that
Right.
conversation going. So, all right, man. Anyways, you passed the interview process. How ecstatic are you that you're like, oh man, I got that class date. I'm about to be a jet pilot. Like my dreams are coming true. Like was that a huge day?
Dude, I remember calling my parents and telling them about it, and they couldn't believe it, because I got the phone call from company, and the next phone call, of course, was to my parents. And
You're a big football
uh,
guy, and today your team won. Congratulations, kudos to you. That was an epic
they
final
shouldn't
five and
have,
that was an epic
shouldn't
final
have,
five.
but they did.
But dude, it's kind of like your draft day, man. Like you got the call, like you're going to the team. Am I right?
That's a really good comparison. I like that a lot, and I think to me it was certainly of, like, the feeling of you made it. Now you still have to go prove yourself, right? Just because you get drafted doesn't mean that you are all of a sudden going to make it to the Super Bowl, but it does mean you still got to prove yourself in camp and prove yourself in the game. And so that's what I was looking forward to. I was like, okay, I secured the opportunity. they've said that they want me. They're excited to have me. They've given me a time to show up, and now it's my turn to show up. And so that's what it came down to in training. I felt like not like I was trying to like prove myself per se, right? But it was more of like I know what's on the line, what's at stake if I'm not successful,
Yeah.
and so I'm putting all my, all my chips in to make sure that I'm successful here.
I like what you said, going to camp, back to the football analogy. And I do want to talk about that next. I want to talk about life in training, but I want to give the listeners a quick spoiler alert. So you're flying the CRJ 200. We had met that summer at a pilot event, and
Hmm.
I ended up flying on your airline early this year. I was going to Kansas to go and ferry a Baron all the way back home. And for everybody to remember,
Hmm.
this was during that crazy time where those twisters like went all the way across the middle of the United States and caused like a bunch of deaths and thousands of dollars in damages, right? So there was all these delays, and just the universe and karma and just life as it is, how crazy it is. I ended up getting rerouted. Instead of going to where I was supposed to go, I was going to like a little Class D airport, and I was on your airline. And that CRJ 200, man, it's a lot smaller than I remembered. And
It always seems to be.
dude, I was in the last seat, and I'm sitting next to the bathroom, and this one woman, she had
Row
like,
13.
yeah, dude, exactly. So this woman from like row 2, she walks all the way to the back of the plane, and she's looking at me the whole time, and we're both like, "Yep, you're about to go to the bathroom. We have a paper thin wall between us, so enjoy yourself." And then it was just awkward, because it's a little plane.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there on this plane, and I was like, dude, I wonder if Aaron's going to be one of my flight crew. And sure enough, I get off the plane, and bro, you're standing in the jet bridge. And it was just one of these like cool moments where I was like, no freaking way. I met this
Right, because
dude.
that was Manhattan, right?
It was this was Chicago to Manhattan. That's right. That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Manhattan, Kansas. Yes, 100%, dude. And oh, dude, that was the tiniest airport. Everything went wrong that day. My guy that I was supposed to meet, he was at flight safety, and I was like, okay, I'll just rent a car. And I get to the rental car place, and they're like, we don't have any cars, and there's no Uber, and there's no nothing in this
No,
town.
no,
I was
no,
just
there's
like,
not.
oh
There's not.
no. And long story short, I helped this guy fly his Baron back, and we had to go all the way around those storms. So we went Kansas all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. We ended up hitting a bird at 4,000 feet
Oh,
at night on the way to Louisiana to go get gas, and it looked like if the Hulk had just punched the spinner, and we're like, okay, well, we're grounded now. We can't continue. And oh, dude, it took us forever just to get back to North Carolina. But the coolest
what is
thing,
the story?
dude, I got the pictures. It was a mess. And of course, then you got like the husband and the wife like having a disagreement,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna go pull dead bird guts out of this hot engine instead of listening to this. Yeah, but it was super cool to see at the jet bridge, because I was like, man, I wonder if he's on this leg. And dude, sure enough, you were. Like, that's just the coolest stuff about aviation, is you're running into people. So
Dude, it's such a small world.
it is, and it's cool because a lot of the people are really supportive, like yourself. So spoiler alert, Aaron is no longer at that airline. That airline had some issues and ended up chopping a bunch of people. So the whole reason I wanted to have you on the episode today, let's talk about the feeling of you made it. You got that awesome call on draft day. You've been on the team, bro. You're making the money. You're having the good experiences.
Hmm.
And life throws you a curveball. And all of a sudden, dude, you wake up the next day and you're like, I'm back to being a CFI.
Yeah.
What did that feel like?
And I'm very thankful for like I'm very thankful for the time, at that first company because it taught me a lot. I was at the point I was about to upgrade to captain, had a good quality of life. I was number 8 in my seat in my base, so I could get the days that I wanted, get the overnights that you wanted. So I was excited for what was to come. But I remember when I found out, this is how vivid I remember. I was for my birthday, I traveled abroad. And so I was on the other side of the planet in Australia, and I wake up and my phone's blowing up. And friends are like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Like, are you okay?" I'm like, "What is going on? Like, did someone, I don't know what was going on, in the time frame that I've been asleep, right? Because of course they've already been up for the day. So is Saturday morning there, and I read the email from the company. It says that what the changes were going to happen, and so now I'm thinking in my head like we've a clock is ticking, right? So I knew that I needed to find what the next venture was going to be. And I'm fortunate that I've landed somewhere, another fantastic company. Um, and I'm very thankful to be here. But man, like that day in January, I had no idea what was going to happen next. So to like you said, to kind of catch up there, come March, I decided to go and take an opportunity to go to another company. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, and so then I'm waiting to get the next class date, and I find out that's not until August. So we're in April, and we got to get to August. What am I gonna do? Well, you got to keep flying the airplane. So I was fortunate to do some more Part 91 corporate stuff, and then also going back to being a part. It was a flight school that did Part 61 and 141 flight training, um, and just always continuously being humbled by the fact of like I'm still a pilot. At the end of the day, I'm still a CFI, and so there's no reason I should be sitting on the couch, gloating or being upset about whatever's happening. So let's just go fly.
Dude, that's crazy. I did not know that. Number one, you're about to upgrade to captain. Number two, you had such like a high seniority seat number. And I remember following your trip when you were abroad in Australia, and I was like, "Oh, dude, that's awesome! You know, using your flight benefits and going on a holiday,
Right, right.
Jet2 holiday. You know, it's everything on social media."
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday.
Yeah, right, dude. And oh man, that had to be so tough to like get that. And you're on the other side of the world. I'm sure for a moment you're just like, my whole life's flipped upside down, and I don't know. So it sounds like, and I didn't know this part of the story. It sounds like you already had a job in a class date, and then you were just CFIing in the meantime, which is better. I thought you had just kind of like gone back to CFI because you're like, well, I got to keep flying, as you said, and I'll interview in the process. But, were you ever, driving to the airport and looking at that Cessna 172 and like, man, what the hell did life throw at me? Or were you just always, like you said, just happy to be in the air?
Yeah, I think well, so I got to the point where I had an opportunity lined up and then it didn't pan out. And so I was still applying and trying to secure interviews and class dates elsewhere as I could. So there definitely was a period where I didn't have that next date lined up yet, but there came to a point where I finally did. Um, and and it even got moved up. Thankfully, it got moved up earlier. I had the opportunity to go, about and from August. It was originally going to be in September. So, um, I got lucky. But I do think there are definitely challenging days where it's like you blink and sometimes things change. But by no means am I ever like looking down on CFI work, right? If someone I ask someone like, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just a CFI." No, no, no. You are a CFI. Like CFI is tough work. It is valuable work, and you're and valuable experience, right? Into growing who you are as a person and then as an aviator. So I still have the utmost respect for CFIs, and especially when things slow down, right? And people are in a position maybe longer than they want to be, right? There's always someone who's trying to get to where you are, right? There's always this student that's trying to become the CFI. The CFI is always trying to become the regional pilot. Regional pilot's always trying to become mainline, whatever it is, or in the corporate space, right? The equivalent. But I was still thankful, like I said, to have the job because when things would slow down this summer, there weren't a ton of CFI positions open. So to be given the opportunity to teach the place that I was given, they didn't have to do that. And especially for the short period of time, just for the summer, they really didn't have to do that, right? The cost of training and onboarding, the time it takes to do that is extensive, and so I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
Yeah, man, I love your upbeat and humble attitude towards everything, and you're just always like keeping it light and breezy, bro. It's awesome. I think that's part of your success, and I like what you did say there. Everybody is kind of looking at you, thinking like, "Oh, I want to get there one day." My primary student pilot right now, she said the same thing. She goes, On day one, she was like, "I think being a flight instructor is the coolest job in the whole world. I would love to be a flight instructor." And I was like, you're the first person in history to ever say that."
Yeah.
So no, I appreciate those kind words, man, and it's cool. You got to, yeah. Were you flying a Duke as well? Is that what you were flying?
No,
The
it's
twin?
so no, I was it's the 91 gig was flying a Cessna 421.
Ah, 421. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
twin piston
yeah.
pressurized airplane. So a pretty cool opportunity. Where that came from, the guy that was flying the TBM PC-12 with, that gig came, the 421 gig came from that PC-12 gig. So the networking, right? The networking is huge. And so I
So
remember
huge.
when things slow down, right? And I'm texting and calling friends and being like, "Hey, do you know anybody? Do you know anything?" And are you willing to send in a recommendation, whatever that may be? Don't burn those bridges. So a lot of those people that I met in college, I'm still friends with today. A lot of those people that I met along the way, in between, those captains that I flew with or other first officers, right? We're all just talking with each other and trying to find out ways to better ourselves and to help each other out, right? No one wants to see a fellow brother or sister on the street. Now I'm not saying that's ever where I was or that it's that aggressive, but the point being, like, we want to help each other, and we know it's a close-knit family of people in the industry.
Couldn't agree more, man. The networking is huge. I love that you had business cards, like I mentioned, in two types. I had some business cards. They're just generic, boring, like white one. It has my socials on it, my phone number. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, dude, hand these out. And I'm the same way. Like, I just got back from flight training in Phoenix for a week, and then I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh no, I don't have any flights booked for the rest of the month. So I'm texting everybody like, hey, are we going to continue on your flight training? Or hey, do you have any trips coming up in your Baron or whatever? So the networking is definitely huge, and you got to be personable. You got to be social. I love talking to all these people that are like, man, I applied to that job and I never heard back from them. And I'm like, so what did you do? And they're like, well, I filled out the application and I sent my resume. And I was like, that's it? Like most of these
Right.
jobs, it's not like Burger King, dude. You can't just fill out one thing and expect to get a call back. Most of the good jobs out there are not, an application based. It's just, hey, I knew this
Yes.
guy and he took a chance on me and he put my butt in a Pilatus. You know what I mean?
Right, and that I was actually just talking about that with one of the kids that have been mentoring, that's currently at BG. Shout out to you, Jake. And
Jake.
we were just talking about how to be competitive, how to build that network, how to stand out. And I was like you just said, like, you got to ask those questions, text those people, text those students, right? Make them tell you no, like
Right.
make them tell you no. Don't bother them to the point where you look like you're making a fool of yourself, right? But it's okay to just professionally, you send that email, send that text during normal business hours, send those messages, and be like, hey, do you know anything? Do you know anybody? Are you willing? Are you looking to fly? Because a lot of times the answer can be yes or no, but it's still just as good.
Yeah.
So
A lot of times it's either no or right, not right now, which is great.
not right now.
Not right
Yes.
now is great. I love that answer. So you wake up in August and you're like, bum ba da bum, ba bum ba da bum. It's like going back to camp, baby. Training day number 2. So how does it feel going to airline training for the second time versus the first time?
You know, it's uh it's actually not as bad because you have an idea of what to expect, right? So if a player gets traded to another team, but you've been through camp before, you know the routine. You have to learn the plays of that team, right? You do have to learn the offense, or you have to learn the defense. You got to get to know the coaches, got to get to know your new players, or teammates rather. Different fan base, but you're still playing the same game. So that's kind of where it's been for me. And I remember talking about this in my interview. They asked about, so having been through it before, like, what are some things that you learned and how is it gonna, help you this next time? And that's what I said exactly. It's like I have an idea of kind of what to expect. I have a lot more time and experience underneath my belt. I know how to be an effective crew member and an effective teammate. And so I can leverage that to do better when it comes time to be put in the same positions, right? So now I'm going through sim training. and we had our first, series of engine failures, like emergency type stuff, and I'm thinking in my head, this is really not that bad, like, and when I'm first going through it, the first company a couple years ago, it feels like it goes fast and you're trying to slow it down, and you may not be flying with the strongest partner, or you could be a great partner, right? But you could still be in your own head. So I think I was a little bit. I got through it, and I passed, and I was thankful for the performance I had then. But now it feels a lot more managed. I feel a lot more kind of under control, and it feels like, oh, that's cool. Your engine failed. Let's keep flying. One of the best things I ever got told was, um, and I love this line of, okay, your engine failed. Take a sip of coffee, then run your checklist, right? And so just not quite literally, but just be under control, be calm, collected, right? You're gonna have a more clear mind. Don't be rash to act and do something that you don't have to undo, right?
Yeah, you're right. It was something that they had to really ingrain in me day one of my King Air training. Because in
Yes.
small piston twin, we're so used to like do everything in 3 seconds or we're gonna die. Whereas,
Mixtures, props, throttles,
yeah,
flaps up, gear up.
yeah, exactly. Versus, you're in a turbine engine. It's like take a breath, say your mantra, do it step by like you're gonna continue flying. So I like that a lot. And what can you tell the listeners are best ways to prepare for going to a type rating? What can you do prior to get yourself ready
Yeah.
for this? Drinking from the fire hose.
Dude, know how you learn. I feel like a lot of times when we come through primary school, you are kind of forced into a camp of you're this or you're that, or you're doing it the way that your teacher wants you to do it. But that may not be the best way that you learn as an individual, right? So I'm a big visual learner. I also like being hands-on with things. So exploit those strengths, right, to help your weaknesses. So when it came time to do training here, one of the things that I did was go take some jump seat observations on my carrier on our fleet, just so I could get a flow of things for the timing, so I could see the checklist being run, to see the flows being done. And so that helped me a lot when it came time for the next stage of training, because then I could recall those experiences. And I'm, again, such a visual learner that I could like see that happening in my head. I could hear that stuff happening in my head and regurgitate that when it came time to show the instructors, right? So the big piece for me right there, like know how you learn, um, and then find ways to take a break.
That's
Uh,
my next question. That's my next question. So hold off right there. But
there we go.
dude, that is huge. That is such a cool answer. I thought you were gonna say maybe like get the POH ahead of time and read through it, or get the I don't know SOPs, or get this or get that. But knowing how you learn, dude, that's such a great thing to mention and something I never thought about. And that's awesome, dude, that you get to ride along. And I think that would be huge for myself too. Is like I'm also a visual learner, so if I can just see, I absorb it over time, right?
Yes.
If I read it in a book 1,000 times, it's like, eh. But if I were in the jump seat like you, man, that was such a good idea. So kudos, man, kudos. And my next question was exactly that. Tell me about your day to day. When do you study, and when do you relax, and how do you relax? So let's jump right into all that. I know you're already getting in there.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was just gonna say next. Was like figure out ways to take a break. You gotta unplug the brain a little bit, because dude, that melon gets struggles after a little bit when you're going through training. You're
Yes,
drinking from
sir.
that fire hose, and sometimes you become so mentally exhausted you can't absorb anymore. You just get tired, like you want to fall asleep because you're so you've reached your climax of ability to absorb. So I think that for me, when it comes time, I like to exercise. So I'll go on a walk. If we're in the I remember times like I would literally just walk laps around my hotel, right? Or go walk on the treadmill. If it's nice outside, I'd prefer to be outside. Um, I'm still an aviation geek at heart. So if I can go to a local place and watch airplanes, right? So I've done some previous training in Charlotte and doing some in Dallas. Both of those airports have like spotters parks, right? Or like places where you can go watch the airplanes. So just go take a Lyft or an Uber and Go sit out there for a little bit. Maybe you study, maybe you don't, right? Maybe you bring the stuff with the intent to study, but you don't have to, right? You hit this there if you need it or want it, but um, you just gotta find ways to unplug. And one of the other ways, I like watching YouTube videos. They don't have to be about aviation, right? It could be about anything, right? But it just give me a chance. Watch sports, something.
So you would say maybe you do some studying in the day, but mostly in the evenings. You're just decompressing. You're just relaxing. You're, like you said, letting your melon cool down after that heat wave of learning all day.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be, it depends on how the schedule is, right? So a lot of your classroom time is going to be during normal business hours. People go into the training department, especially the ground instructors, because it's a normal 9 to 5 type of job, right? And I respect them for that. But that means that you're going to have, 9 to 5, 8 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever, a lunch break in between. So when you come back, or right before you leave, maybe in our case, like we did some studying like there, like we took a break and then like, okay, like let's get some stuff done right now, like while we're still have a little bit of energy, and unless we're completely exhausted, then sure, we'll make a break. But if we're feeling all right, let's knock some out, right, with your partner or your classmates. Um, or let's talk about it over dinner. Like we'll go and take an hour, a couple hours, right? And we'll come back to it. But I think you just gotta figure out what makes sense. The sim schedules, unfortunately, can be all over the place. Like I'm starting at 4 p.m. on one of the days this week,
Ay,
and
ay,
later in the
ay.
week, I'm starting at 4 a.m. So like the schedules could change, and you gotta adjust your sleep schedule, adjust your, when you're gonna eat, when you're gonna study, right? And so you just kind of find ways to make that work for you, what you need.
Man. Well, Aaron, thanks so much for all your kind words of wisdom, man. Uh, I'm excited for the future. When do you finish up your training?
Yeah, we should be done here by the end of the month, and then we'll hit the line going into next month. Super excited to be back in the saddle, as they say, and connecting people where you want to go.
Dude, and you're going to be on my side of the world, kind of in my own backyard, possibly.
That's
So,
right.
so I'm really hopeful, man. Maybe one of these days I'll get to be aboard another one of your flights or something like that. So this can be awesome. And
Dude, I'll let you know. I'll let you know. I'll send you the schedule, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, man. We'll stay in touch and we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, dude, I greatly appreciate it. Maybe we'll have to put the socials in the description if people want to reach out, say hello. I'm all for it. I'm all for the questions or the comments, good, bad, and ugly, whatever it may be. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share my story. I look forward to coming back for that update.
Wicked, dude. Wicked. Well, we'll see you. Goodbye, everybody.
Clear to land. Doing 280 at 7 off.